All right, now we're going to talk about Chapter 5, and we're going to go over some of the common forms that are going to be necessary in order to retail vehicles. Now, if you're a wholesaler taking this class, I understand you're probably thinking, why are we talking about retailing if I'm going to be a wholesaler? Well, as far as this class is concerned, we have to teach you everything with retail because you don't have to come back and retake the class if you switch from wholesale to retail as far as your license. So we want to make sure we're preparing you as much as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can see Chapter 5, Part 1 together. Now, all of these forms that you're going to see here today are brought to you by our friends at V12. Reason why is because, again, with V12, being able to print all of the paperwork on a regular printer instead of a dot matrix printer, it's just one of the many solutions that V12 provides that allows it to be a tool for the modern age more than anything else. Now, as far as these rules are concerned, one of the first things we're going to talk about is a federal buyer's guide. Now, that's the official name, and we go over a lot of the details that are already kind of broken out in here. But I like to start with the picture just so you're very familiar with the form that we're talking about. Each one of you, if you've bought a car from a dealer, you've seen this form before. Does this form really provide any value to the customer?
No.
I mean, if you're buying a car, does this give you warm and fuzzies? If you see this on a car, like it's going to help you in some way, shape, or form?
No, not really.
For the most part, I mean, it is a glorified form. Now, out of the gate, let's talk about why it's important. It's important because if you don't have this on every single retail car, it's going to cost you upwards of $16,000 per offense. So this is the reason why you really want to pay attention to this form. If nothing else, to be in compliance and make sure that obviously those costly fines associated with it. What we're going to show you today is we're going to use this as a lead-in or an opportunity to sell more things as a dealer. Because I know we talked about it earlier in the lesson, what people think about dealers as far as from the way of selling and whatnot, but it's important to give your customers options, I would say, more than anything else. Really provide all of the information to your customer in the hopes that, again, you can provide added value at somewhere through the course of the conversation. So up top, it's really basic. Your vehicle make, model year, and vehicle identification number, and then the warranty information. Warranty for an independent dealership, if you misspeak and don't articulate yourself correctly when it comes to warranties, you can wind up being in a lot of trouble. Most dealers are just going to mark the box as is, no dealer warranty, just so that way there's no misconstruing what we're talking about here. There are some dealers that do offer warranties. Most of the time, I would say it's a limited warranty based on a percentage, whether it's 50% parts and labor, and then what systems are covered. And it's also depending upon is a warranty actually required based on how you're practicing as well. Now, rather than offering a warranty, I would probably suggest that you buy a service contract and try to work that angle personally myself if I was a dealer. Have either of you ever bought a service contract for your vehicle?
No.
Okay. I will tell you that I teach this. I own a dealership. I've been in automotive for almost 20 years. I still buy service contracts. In fact, I have 2 service contracts on the vehicles that are out in front of my house right now. And they're both Toyotas to boot, because what does everybody tell you when it comes to Hondas and Toyotas?
They last forever.
Yeah,
Yep,
absolutely. They last forever. Until they don't, because I don't know if you ever had the pleasure of trying to find parts over the past 3 to 5 years. Not only sometimes are they non-existent, but if they do exist, they're 3 times the price. And because especially my wife's car is a Toyota Highlander, and it's a Platinum, and to boot, it's a hybrid. Now, all of those things combined with my wife, I don't know what it is. I've been in the car industry as long as I can remember, and she still won't tell me when there's a problem with her car. I will physically have to drive the car, look around, what the heck? When did that? Oh, that's been going on for a while. Okay, cool. When were you going to tell me? And that's unfortunately the way I've got to find out outside of the scheduled maintenance. Now, by having a service contract, it doesn't make it bulletproof either. Did you guys know that if you do have a warranty on your vehicle, that if you don't have it regularly serviced, they can actually deny the warranty claim?
Sounds familiar.
Seems like it makes sense, but I can't tell you how many people, well, it's a Toyota, so it'll run forever. I don't have to worry about it. I work on the thing myself, and then, there's a problem, and then all of a sudden you can't prove that you took it into a shop. So kind of a fun fact, I will still take it into a very basic oil change place, just so that way it was visually inspected and it's got something of record as far as that it was worked on and looked at. And I will take it to the dealership probably every 50,000 miles or so, just to showcase, just for them to write it up and say, hey, here's all the things that you should do. And then I have a mechanic that does it for much less. But still one of those things, it's on record. You took it there, you're looking at it, and you can go from there. Now, specific to a manufacturer's warranty, one of the big things that kind of brought Kia and Hyundai back on the map after 2011 was the warranty that they offer. Do either one of you know what the Kia or Hyundai warranty is by any chance?
Not offhand, no.
Not familiar, no.
10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. It is one of the longest in the actual industry. Here's the problem, though. If you are the second owner, it immediately drops down to a 5-year, 60,000-mile. So if you're not the first owner, which if you're going to buy a Hyundai or a Kia, you probably should buy it new anyway, because you're going to need that warranty. Guess what? It's there for a reason. But that's what kind of brought that consumer confidence back, where, if you go over that 60,000 miles, unless it's a goodwill type situation, which I have had happen before, it is something that you really need to make sure, even when you're buying from auction, because there are some dealers that think, oh, well, this is already covered under warranty, no problem. Until you look at, whenever it becomes the second owner, then the warranty could shift and change. So important things to definitely keep in mind. But with service contracts, Chris, you had mentioned that you've never bought a service contract from a dealer. Was there any reason why you decided to not go with a service contract for your vehicle?
Just at the time, most likely just to cut costs.
Sure. And cost is absolutely a factor. I've seen situations where customers have been completely stretched thin, and the idea of trying to add anything to their monthly payment is just outside of what even is feasibly possible. But
also, from a consumer standpoint, you also have resistance to upsells and stuff like that.
Sure, absolutely. I'm actually going to go through an upsell technique that's been beneficial for me once we talk about the contract cancellation agreement, bringing it back to the service contract, because I'm a firm believer in service contracts. I buy them, I sell them. It does depend on the company, I would say, that you use, but a service contract can provide much needed, kind of like the buffer we were talking about financially with the floor plan. It's a buffer between buying the car and getting to the point where I would say it's an acceptable tolerance of risk coming to own a vehicle as far as when things actually break. So think about it from a perspective of, if you could pay $30 a month for 2 years, 24,000 miles of most of the major mechanical covered on your car, would you buy it? At the time, depending on how it was presented, depending on how it was financed, depending on
how it's presented, yes. 2 years seems relatively short.
Okay.
But so I guess it also depends on the car itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's consumer confidence as well. You know how hard it is to upsell Toyota product? Hey, by the way, this has been known to be the most bulletproof brand out there on the marketplace. Did you want to get a service contract today so that way we can enhance that? It takes some skill set. So one of the biggest things, and most dealers understand this, but for those of us that haven't been dealers or are coming into this industry, it's important to understand that wearable items are not covered under warranty. Tires, brakes, wiper blades, rotors, things like that. And especially because, Will, I know that you're a little bit younger. You ever drive a sports car before?
Never.
Never. Okay. Well, I promise you, if I was to put you in front of a sports car, I'd probably trust Chris a little bit more than you as far as driving that car and keeping it in reasonable levels without blowing up that engine. And I've seen that happen with some of my younger customers as well, where they try to take something back or they try to alter it because, oh, it all of a sudden broke. Uh, Cars don't spontaneously combust unless it's a Ford, but we'll talk about that later. It's one of those situations where when you're working with a vehicle, and that's why when I sell them used, I let my customers know how detailed I've been with these reports. I let them know how in depth we've looked at these vehicles, so that way there's no question, cause, or concern that, hey, if you bring this back, this is on you. This is why we talk about the service contract. I even have my customer sign, yeah, no problem. If you don't want a service contract, I totally get it. Just go ahead and sign here that you've denied all the coverage here today. And as soon as you drive off the lot, you assume full liability and risk for any kind of repairs that are necessary on the car. And the minute people hear that, all of a sudden a little bit of a gear switches of, well, how much was it? 30? And then we start the negotiation process. Typically speaking, there is some situations where you look at a contract, there is no more room. You could offer it unless they're paying cash. It's probably not going to happen. So important things to keep in mind. Now, differences with if the vehicle is still under manufacturer warranty. You do have to let your customer know that, yes, this is under manufacturer warranty. This is something that we need to take into consideration. And also, if there is any kind of deductible with that warranty plan as well. If the customer is going to have to pay anything at that time of service. And I've had some really weird stuff happen before. I remember I retailed a Jetta one time, and European cars always make me a little bit nervous. I don't care how well you've looked at them, how well you've scoped them. It just always puts me a little bit on edge because you literally need to know European auto. And if you have to take it to a repair facility, usually they charge a lot of money and they don't care about your feelings. This is what it is. There is no price break because you're a dealer. Deal with it. I retailed this car, and customer, it was to her daughter, but customer was the one that her mom was end up paying for it. She called me 2 days later and just starts yelling at me for the check engine light coming on. And I'm thinking, yeah, I knew it. I knew something was going to happen, in the back of my mind, but always customer facing. Oh, yes, absolutely. I totally understand your frustration. I'll tell you what, why don't you take it down to my repair facility? Let's have them take a look at it and see what's going on. And you're not going to charge me for that? I'm like, no, absolutely. Completely on me. Let's take a look at it and let's go from there. And my technician calls me about an hour later. Garrett, she didn't screw the gas cap on tight enough. So there was an evap leak. We went and reset that for you. We're going to keep it here for another half an hour, and then we're going to release it and everything's going to be fine. And then she called me. Everything's fine. Yep. Clean bill of health. We got whatever the problem was. It was repaired and you're good to go. Oh, thank you. And the customer is ecstatic and, fireworks and everything else in between. I cannot tell you how many times it's just been a loose gas cap. Like it's one of those things that unless you have a code reader on you, it's just not something you really give consideration to. That's why that code reader is so important, because it's a difference of, is this a major problem or is this a problem that I overlooked, and let's go on from there. So any questions on that so far?
No.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So this breaks down the lower half of that first page. Basically, again, if there was a service contract that was offered, if there's any kind of additional warranties outside of it. So that way the customer is super aware of what's going on when they buy their vehicle. Now, let me ask you, Will, I don't think you've ever bought from a dealership, but Chris, I know you've bought a car or two from a dealership before. Are you reading these pieces of paper as you're going through?
You just give it like a cursory,
Sure.
read through real quick, skim, if you will.
I think everybody tries to save face in some way, shape, or form. Oh, yeah, I totally get what you're doing here.
Yeah.
I have no idea what's going on, but I'm going to nod. I'm going to smile. There's a lot of this going on, and people are comfortable, because what is the main focus of consumers, even yourself in general, when you're buying a car? What is the main focus, typically speaking? And then it seems like the brain just shuts off after they get this information.
I mean, it's consumers in general. Is first things first is always price.
Yeah. It for a lot of people, I would say most men that typically is the forward focus. I'll tell you anything that happens with my wife. Oh, I want to get this new and I want to redo this. And the first thing out of my mouth always is, how much is it going to cost?
Yeah.
Because again, and this is a different way as far as selling, depending on who your customer is. And it doesn't have to be gender specific, but is it price focused, or is it comfort and reliability and how it looks and makes me feel and everything else in between? Those are two factors that we have to kind of play together, because I will tell you right now, my commuter vehicle, as far as work is concerned, is drastically different than my actual vehicle that I would want to drive on a consistent basis. So just things to factor in and things to keep in mind. Now, when it comes to service contracts, especially as a dealer, okay, there are two what I would call soft ads. And the reason why we call them soft ads is because these are things that could be canceled in any way at any point as far as the life of the vehicle. And most people don't know that. If you have gap insurance, if you have service contracts, they can be canceled and should be canceled before you resell it. Oftentimes people forget about them, resell it, and this is just money that has now gone up into the ether. So we'll talk very quickly about gap insurance before we get into service contracts. Have either of you ever purchased gap insurance before?
No.
So depending on the creative math, like we were talking about earlier, Will, about how much of a down payment you put on your car, that gap insurance can really kick in and sometimes save you, because like we talked about, if you're financing at 23.9%, your total finance charge is almost as much as it was in the car. And let's say you total your car. What happens now? If you're upside down in your payments and your book is consistently dropping, what happens with, who's going to be left with that total amount? Because if you do not have gap insurance and your car is total and your insurance only pays out so much, you're still going to be responsible for that difference. Whereas with gap insurance, the gap insurance kicks in and basically covers the differentiation between the amount of what insurance paid out for the vehicle and what you still owe, leaving you not on the hook for a bunch of money basically in between. And there have been some things as far as with California, because California likes to save the world, that gap insurance is predatory when it comes to consumers. But I will tell you right now, if most of the consumers are only putting down 5 to 10%, I would argue it's an absolute necessity, because it's almost financial negligence if you're in a car that depreciates that much. Did you guys know that if you buy a brand new Nissan, that it depreciates almost in half in 6 months? And we talked about that earlier in the lesson. I mean, just where do you go with something like that?
Mm-hmm.
How much money can you physically lose on a car where it's a acceptable amount of risk? So these are the kind of things that we factor in as far as gap insurance is concerned. And service contracts are no different. Now, why did I buy service contracts on 2 Toyota vehicles? Simple. Part availability, part cost, and hybrids. There are still some things that hybrids are, although functional and great to have, when they go wrong very quickly. And you want to make sure that you've got that additional kind of safety net when it comes to service contracts in that capacity, especially with, my wife's car was over 50,000 when it retailed new, and parts on that car, I've already looked, they aren't cheap. So and the more that you put on a vehicle, where it's the deluxe or the platinum or whatever it is, more opportunity for failure down the road. So it's important to kind of hedge your bets in that aspect to make sure that you've got that necessary protection. Now, it does depend on the price that you pay. Service contracts, gap insurance, everything is negotiable. Okay. So, and it's also important that if you're looking at it from a financial perspective, that sometimes your finance company might offer you cheaper gap insurance. I know most of the dealers here that are listening to this probably don't want to hear that, but it's one of those situations where, again, if you can sell it, great. If your customer gets it, that's the most important thing, because again, you want to try to navigate that risk for your customer as much as you can. So any questions on service contracts or anything fun like that?
Just a quick question. So if you offer a service contract, in order to fulfill it, do you need to have like a mechanic that you work with off-site or something on-site?
It's a great question. Most of the time, the service contracts are done through third-party vendors, actually. So if you're looking at like a any kind of service contract, it is based upon, it's like writing insurance. They're going to look at it from the acceptable amount of risk. How many of these vehicles have they taken a claim out on? And they're going to adjust their price accordingly. So it's not like they have to come back to you in order to get that service contract handled. They can take it to any licensed repair facility and then get it fixed completely, out of pocket or whatever deductible has been sold at that time.
Got it.
All right, so we're going to take a break in between the buyer's guide portion and talk about vehicle history reports and why they're important. Now, vehicle history reports can provide very detailed analysis of the vehicle that we're potentially going to buy and can provide a little bit more insight as well to make sure that we're not buying a car for the wrong reasons. Here's the important thing that's going to be on your test. The NMVTIS report is required to be offered to every single retail customer. Failure to do so is actually a $1,000 offense. Now, NMVTIS is the National Motor Vehicle Title and Information System, and it's a federal database that is designed to provide the most important title information about a vehicle so that way our customer is aware of what they're potentially buying and what it looks like. VINaudit.com is actually the company that we recommend that you utilize. I don't know what it is about VINaudit.com and their ability to pull the NMVTIS report, but they pull more data. And it's a little bit different from the free NMVTIS report from Carfax. Now, both will work, but the idea behind providing this information is so that way we provide the most detailed information to our customer, so that way we can prevent any kind of negative repercussions from happening. So this is an example of what that NMVTIS report is going to look like. And as you can see, really basic vehicle specifications. I'm going to zoom in real quick so that way you can see it. Your title history records, if there's any prior junk or salvage or theft or liens reported. They're also going to look at some of the sales records as well. So for this particular one that we're talking about, and obviously this is back in 2019, but it sold for $31,000. This car was actually, it was a fun car. I bought it from one of my franchise stores, and the driver's side bumper had a little bit of a punch to it. And because it was a brand new car, nobody wanted to deal with it because this is also during March and April when COVID was going on. So I was actually able to buy the car at a much lower price, fixed the car, drove it around for 35,000 miles, and ended up selling it back to the same franchise store for more money. So that was the fun little turnaround. And what you can do when you can navigate wholesale, definitely a lot harder to do nowadays in this landscape that we currently have, but always a fun story. And then problem checks, things like flood, fire, hail damage. We're going to talk about all of those vehicle history conditions a little bit later on in class. But the way I like to liken it as far as filling out this paperwork, if you would want to know about it, if you were buying this car for a loved one, put it on the piece of paper. Make sure that they're aware of the situation. And then anytime there's a trouble spot on the NMVTIS report, I always have the customer initial and date next to the trouble spot, and I'll actually have them sign and date each page of the NMVTIS report. A little bit of overkill, but I can't tell you how many times I've seen it in situations where customer comes back and says, well, I never read that. I never agreed to that. I never understood that. And then you bring up their signature point next to where it is, the page, and how many times you've had to sign this over and over again. Because again, we're operating in California, the most consumer-friendly state in the United States. So as business owners, we need to make sure that we're taking the necessary precautions, not just to give our customer a better source of information, but also to safeguard our business practices as well. So any questions on NMVTIS?
No.
Now, this one you probably heard of. You guys have heard of Carfax, right?
Yep.
I hate Carfax so much. I remember it's hard to think about a time when you would buy a car before Carfax, but It's the objectivity of the reporting that bothers me. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail. Now, when Carfax first started, it's evolved literally over time. And this, again, is the example of the same car, that 2019 Toyota Prius Prime, and it happens to have minor damage on the Carfax. I know exactly where the damage was because I was the one that repaired it. So it was an easy conversation to have if I was going to be retailing this. This happened to be just a wholesale piece for me at the time of when I did it. But the thing about Carfax now, you guys ever seen a Carfax where it says minor to moderate damage?
No, I don't think so.
It's the goofiest thing in the world because now we're in the middle portion of minor to moderate. And let's just say you're a regular consumer off the street and you read a Carfax that says minor to moderate Carfax. Where does your head go? Is it minor?
Moderate, of course.
Moderate. Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody, the dealership, anybody who looks at this Carfax now, and they do, they consider it now as a moderate. Anytime that that goes over anything beyond minor, it becomes a car that frankly a lot of retail people just don't want to deal with because it's a yes, you can get a good deal on the car, yes, you can get a good price on the car, but what happens when you have to go to resell it? That's typically one of the big problem points with that. And then much like in NMVTIS, we are also going over titling history, things of that nature, in order to verify any of that additional information that's on there. Now, one of the big things that factors in with Carfax is the service history records. So when you're talking about service history, that's really what sets Carfax apart, because now I get to see at least what was reported. Where did the customer go to get their service done on their vehicle? How much did they get the service performed? Did they deny anything? Was anything major done to the vehicle as far as the repair is concerned? Now, obviously, the incident reports are always fun, but I also kind of take them with a grain of salt as well, because I'm going to talk to you about a company that actually will take a look at a vehicle, do a report, upload it to Carfax. That's how much it's trusted as a report, and then also give more of a retail peace of mind when it comes to that as well. So, this goes on for days and weeks sometimes as far as the service histories are concerned. It also gives you some indications as far as what any of this information means on it as far as from a definition standpoint, and then allows for the customer and the dealer signature as well. So again, one more point of clarity. If there is an accident on Carfax, the way I personally operate, I will actually ask for the customer to initial and date next to the accident report and next to the minor indication, whatever it is. So that way they're aware. So that way there's nothing that comes up after the fact as far as misleading or misuse of information, if that makes sense. AutoCheck, yet another report. This one done by Experian. And this one's actually kind of cool, but I say that because I'm in the auction industry. So this is commonly used by auction houses, and especially if it were to roll across the block as far as any kind of inspection point is concerned, it'll now be uploaded to AutoCheck, and it gives an additional layer of transparency when it comes to the reporting. But what you'll notice on here, you see how this one says no accidents, the other one had a minor accident? That's why you've got to run all of these reports, because I've seen it where it's been a clean NMVTIS, clean Carfax, dirty AutoCheck. I've seen it where it's been clean across the board, and I had to pull a KSR, and there was information on the KSR that hadn't made its way over to any of these reportings yet. KSR is something specific as far as registration information here in the state of California. So these reports can be tricky, and the way you don't want to find out is when you're standing in a courtroom being served paperwork and saying, hey, by the way, did you know this happened? Because unfortunately, the way things work in California, the dealer knows or should have known about any potential vehicle that was in their inventory. So really big aspect as far as that portion is concerned. But they do go over, hey, this has had no accidents, this vehicle checks out. Again, just kind of giving consumer, dealer, whoever it is, peace of mind. And yes, dealers are going to look at this because they're the ones that are going to have to end up selling it. They have to sell through that objection. I know it's something I hear from rookie salespeople all the time. Oh, don't worry, it was just a little old lady with a shopping cart, is every accident I've ever heard or tried to sell through my entire life. Okay? Trying to objectify what the accident was. I'll point out the information. This is the report that we did. This is the repairs that we got done. This is what we did to make it go in the right direction for you. Just so that way, again, I take it head on. I don't want to worry about, well, what happened here or any of those situations, because then you start to lose that trust. And it's really hard to, once you've gained that as someone selling a car, to get that back once that's been compromised. So any questions on those 3 reports?
No.
I'm going to throw a 4th one at you, and it's just because I love it. I love this report. And even if I didn't work for the company, I still will get TrueFrame reports on any accident cars that I have. Just because, again, when I go to sell it, I want to be able to objectively look. Someone came out, someone looked at this car, and this is what they found. So this was an old vehicle that I had. It was a Hyundai. That's why I know so much about Hyundai warranties. It's a 2019 Hyundai. And when I bought this car, I mean, it looked like whoever owned it, they definitely had kids, and they drove that car with their eyes closed. There were about 6 panels that probably had been or needed to be repaired and resurfaced and just made to look better. Now, I can tell you right now, I have an incredible body shop. Okay. And looking at this report, the inspector that came out to look at it, the left fender, the right bumper, and then the tailgate portion, they couldn't even find the other panels that had been painted. That's how close to factory spec my body shop was able to get. Now, if you have a bad body shop, yeah, this report might look a little different. But this is why when we're selling through these kind of situations, it gives us that kind of clarity, and then also that kind of trust and transparency we can create with our customer of, yes, this car has been painted, this car has been maybe had some panels replaced, but this is what it looks like now. This is what we're able to do with it. There is no structural, and we have that guarantee that goes along with it. So it just makes it easier to sell right through that process and not have to worry about it as much as we go through it. So any questions on those reporting elements?
Nope.
And again, it's one more thing we can add, so that way when we're talking to our customer, we can really build that confidence base as well. Because some customers, they don't care. Like we were talking about, they would just literally sign their life away and sign right through that paperwork. There are some customers where we have to really build those added layers. I know when I buy a car, I am the worst customer to deal with, because not only am I picking your paperwork apart, I'm picking your sales process apart, and I'm actually probably teaching you a thing or two, but that's just how I am. Okay. The worst person you can sell to is, and I remember I was retailing a car one time. This person read every single line on all of the pieces of paper that I had, every contract, and would ask me questions to summarize each paragraph at the end of it. I felt like I was doing a dealer training selling a car. And it's always going to be the car that you're losing money on too. So it was a hard day at the office, but one of those situations where, again, you take the good with the bad and you kind of keep on rolling. So to go back to the buyer's guide now that we've kind of shown you what those other reporting portions look like, the backside of the buyer's guide, it's weird. It literally says, hey, these are some of the common defects that can occur on a used vehicle. Did you know your engine could break, your transmission could jam, your tires could, and the list goes on. To let you know, basically to explain to you on the federal level, hey, cars will break, be aware, okay? And then you have the dealership name, the address, the phone number, the email address, and then who to see for complaints. The buyer is going to sign down below. And I've included all the information in there because, again, another good friend of mine who is no longer in business. So he said, sure, you can use all the information there on your screen. No problem. Add it to your book. So that's a buyer's guide. Okay. Important thing is to recap. 1, it's a $16,000 fine if you don't have it on a retail vehicle. You need to make sure your customer signs both the front and the back, and it needs to be hanging in the side window. That's important. That'll be on your test. The buyer's guide must be hanging in the side window in order to be in compliance. Any questions regarding that?
Nope.
Nope.
All right. So now we're going to get into some additional forms that are going to be necessary outside of the federal requirement. These are all the fun California specific vehicles.